Hey you, I'm so glad you're here today. I'm Jenny Prachko from Owls and Indigo, and I make videos about goal setting, spirituality, journaling, mental health and awareness, and my story. Today is another beginner paint with me. This is a very simple Goldenrod Botanical painting. I like to do these watercolor paintings in my bullet journal, but you can definitely replicate these paintings on watercolor paper or any other watercolor medium. Just a quick note before we actually get into the tutorial. In my voiceover, I don't know what I was thinking. I must have been like thinking about a different plant, but in the voiceover, you'll hear me say golden seal instead of goldenrod. This is not the golden seal, this is the goldenrod. These two plants are very different. In the future, I'll be doing a watercolor golden seal paint with me botanical that you can add to your collection too. So now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the tutorial. Today we're doing a golden seal paint with me. I went hiking recently over the weekend and I just saw this everywhere here in Michigan. So it's a fairly easy beginner tutorial. So let's go ahead and get into this. I'm using 4 colors today from my Winsor Newton Pocket watercolor palette. I'm using the straight up yellow and then the one that's a little more golden and green later on. Actually, I guess I'm only using 3 colors today. So what you want to do is you want to start with the lightest or your brightest yellow and just make little dots where you want the cones of the golden seal to be. While these little dots dry, we're going to move on to the stem and leaf portion. This is really forgiving this time for this beginner paint tutorial. The leaves of the golden seal themselves are very wobbly and almost have a serrated look to them. So you don't need a steady hand to do these leaves, and you can just kind of let the brush do the work for you. And here you can see I'm being very loose with these leaves, drawing them with an outline first and concentrating the color at the base of the leaf. And I talked about this in my last paint with me. If you have too much watercolor, just drag it back to where you want it to go. Watercolor is very forgiving while it's still wet. So if you get too much, you can easily thin it out. You can drag it where you want it to go, or you can take a dry brush and mop up some of that saturated color. And just put the leaves where you want them and make them really loose and wobbly. We want this watercolor painting to look very wild and natural. This is not supposed to look perfect. And now I'm adding more light yellow cones to the other side. I wanted to show you 2 different ways to do this. The first way is basically just a line of dots that you make thicker at one end. And this second technique is to bunch the dots together to make a thicker cone of the golden seal. Alright, now while that's a little bit wet, I'm going to go ahead and pick up some of this more golden yellow and put it at the base of each of those bright yellow cones that I made, and sort of fill in the gaps in between the brighter yellow dots that we made as well to give it a little more dimension. You don't want to cover this up, you want to have this on the bottom side. That way it looks a little more like shading and has more of a 3D effect. I like doing this when the watercolors are still wet, but you can definitely let your watercolor completely dry in between colors and then go in for a more defined look. As you can see, there's a lot of space in between these yellow cones. That's because we're going to be going back in with greenery in a moment. Here I'm just taking that same green and creating little dots. These are the little buds of the cones that have yet to grow and fully open up. Now I'm moving on to the bottom portion of each of the yellow cones on the golden seal. We're creating a leaf that goes underneath each yellow cone. And so for some of the cones, you want to see the leaf on the outside, like I did for the first one. And then the other cones, you want to make sure that the leaf is behind the cone itself. So again, you can get more dimension and more of a 3D look. I'm also adding in a few more leaves where I feel like I need some. Just outlining it first and then really saturating it and dragging that color back to the base of the leaf. So it'll be darkest there at the base. After you finish this video, make sure you head over to owlsandindigo.com and sign up for the private monthly spirituality journaling prompt that goes out on the 1st of every month. You'll receive a private email from me, the secret monthly spirituality journaling prompt, a private video explanation, and a peek into my private journal entry for the same spirituality question for the month. Sign up now before the 1st. The link is in the description. Here I'm creating little buds of the golden seal that are popping out. So I have the base of a stem and then also the base of a bud that I'm just drawing in here with a little bit more saturated color and a bit of a U shape. I'm just adding little leaves in where I think I need them in this golden seal painting. So if you're new here, you might be wondering why I'm doing this in a bullet journal. I do all of my watercolors in a bullet journal. I use them for my monthly setups. If you want to see my bullet journal monthly plan with me that features this painting, I will leave that linked up above and down below. I like to use my bullet journal for watercolors instead of an actual canvas. It helps me keep the amount of supplies that I keep around to a minimum, and it also makes it so I don't have to deal with watercolor canvases or watercolor board everywhere and paper everywhere. So for the biggest leaf at the bottom here, again, I'm using a lot of color and making it very saturated and as wobbly and serrated on the edges as possible. Next, I'm just going over this really light leaf, adding a little bit more color to it, and adding a little bit more depth and richness and saturation to the base of each leaf as they get closer to the stem. And again, I'm using the exact same color green. I'm just using a little bit more saturated version of it. There's still a little bit more that we're going to do to this painting after it dries for a few minutes, but I wanted to make sure that I included my moon wheels here. Every month I do a watercolor painting for my monthly cover page, and I also include a moon wheel that has the dates, which I'll fill in later, and then the calendar and the month below. This month for October, we have 2 full moons. We start on a full moon and we end on a full moon, which I thought was pretty cool. So later on, I'll fill in the dates around this moon wheel calendar. And now that the watercolor painting has dried a little bit, I'm going back in with the exact same green and with a very, very thin tipped brush to draw in the veins of the leaves. And you want to be really light-handed with this. It can easily go wrong if you're a little too heavy-handed. Remember, just wipe off your brush so it's not too saturated and you get the thinnest line possible. And here we are at our final leaf, the biggest one, drawing in the veins, and you can be really loose with this and you don't have to have a steady hand at all. That's why I love watercolors. They're so forgiving, and I love how loose these botanicals always come out looking. If you're interested in the monthly bullet journal setup that features this Goldenrod paint with me, I'll link that up above and down below. I'm so grateful that you chose to spend your time here with me today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!